Hi guys, my name's Barry and welcome back to the channel. Believe it or not, the remake to I Spit on Your Grave actually got a sequel, I Spit on Your Grave 2, and it's not the same person in this one. It's not Jennifer Hills, it's a girl called Katie. She is an aspiring model and she works part-time in a diner as well. So it's about her journey and what happens to her. Just like Jennifer, we find out from the beginning that Katie is very resourceful. She mentioned to her neighbour Jason that she learned a lot when she lived in Florida. It's little bits like that I appreciate in movies because it doesn't show us what happened previously. It doesn't hit us over the head with it. She just gives us subtle hints as to how resourceful she is and how she became that way. As she's leaving work, she finds an ad for free photographs. It sounds a little bit too good to be true, and it was, because when she got there, the photographer seemed a little dodgy. He asked her to lose her clothes and she's like, no, I'm not losing my clothes. And he says, well, you'll need to do that if you want to A, become a model, and B, if you want these photographs for free. But she politely declined. She said, no, don't want the photographs, I'm not going to lose my clothes, see you later. The photographer had this creepy brother called Georgie who looked like he felt really bad. He seems to be the kind of sympathetic one in the group. And after she went home, he followed her home, got to her apartment and said he was sorry for what his brother said and done, and he offered to give her the photographs for free on a little USB stick, and she kind of like, well, I don't really want to take them, but she took them anyway. She's like, thanks very much. And as she was looking at them, the photographs were pretty good. As a photographer myself, I was looking at them thinking, those are some really nice free photographs. Unfortunately for Katie, she went to put rubbish in her chute in her apartment, but she left the door slightly open, so when she got back in, she went to bed, and she woke up during the night with Georgie at the end of her bed taking photographs of her. Ugh. Now, as this sequel has no ties to the original movie, I genuinely didn't know what to expect. I assumed there was going to be some sort of rape and revenge within the movie, and that's exactly what we got, but I didn't know how that was going to happen and where we would end up. But in this one, we see that Georgie is the one who started to rape her first, and her neighbour Jason heard it, so he came in to see what was wrong. He noticed that she was crying, she was tied up, and he got killed straight away. After this ordeal, Georgie panicked and he phoned his brother, who is the main photographer, Ivan, and he came and he's like, what have you done this time? So it seems like he's done it time and time again, and they had to try and clean up. And what they done was they tried to make it look like Katie was the one who killed her neighbour Jason, and she obviously had to have disappeared from the scene. At first I thought they were going to leave her there, maybe kill her or just wound her and leave her there all drugged up, and the police would blame her for the murder. But things got a whole lot worse every time the movie went on. They, instead of just leaving her there, they took her away and they put her in some sort of basement where they could rape her time and time again. It was absolutely horrendous. From this point in the movie, this part, I'm not saying that what happened in the first movie was bad, it wasn't bad, but what happened next was 10 times worse than what happened in the first movie. To keep Katie from fighting, she was drugged quite a lot, but there was one time where they drugged her, but she spat it out. She was sick, and when Georgie was trying to clothe her, she managed to escape. She attacked Georgie, she escaped, but as she escaped, she was running out in the street, and things just didn't look quite right. And as she was running about, nobody was speaking English, and all the signs were in a different language, and I'm thinking to myself, has this just got even worse for Katie? And yes, it did. She wasn't in New York anymore, she was now in Bulgaria. As she made a scene, the police arrived, and then this main police officer came and he took her in and asked her questions, and I thought this was going to follow the same beats as the first movie, and it kind of does, but with a smaller twist. And when the police officer was questioning her, I was thinking to myself, okay, he's obviously part of this, he's going to take her away somewhere and hand her back to these people. That didn't happen, thankfully, but unfortunately something worse happened. A woman called Anna Patov came. She was from a women's shelter, and she was explaining to Katie that she's experienced the same things in her life, and she showed her scars. And as soon as I saw that, I said to myself, okay, she's the one that's going to take her away, she's the bad guy. And lo and behold, that was the case, and it was quite frightening the way it happened, because she said to her, I'll take you to the US Embassy, but first I'll need to go back to my house, I'll give you some clothes so you can get something to eat if you want, give you some money. And she's like, okay, that's fine. Why wouldn't she trust her? So she took her back to her house and she went downstairs, and as she went downstairs, that was the very basement that Katie was in from the very beginning, or from when she was taken to Bulgaria. As soon as I saw that, I was frightened for her, because that was a horrible scene. Seeing the look on her face, knowing that, oh no, I've made another mistake here, I'm back to where I was, and it was an absolute nightmare. As the movie went along, because of the length of time we got to when she was taken back into the basement, I genuinely thought maybe we weren't going to get a revenge part of this film. Maybe the difference in this one is it was about her being raped, but now it's about her trying to escape, almost like a film like The Girl Next Door or An American Crime, sort of like a Joseph Fritzl style movie, but in the movie world. That's what I thought was going to happen. She was just trying to escape all this time, and she just couldn't quite do it until eventually, hopefully, she does escape. Because we already had a couple of rape scenes, I thought, okay, we're done with the rape scenes, but unfortunately not. The main man came back home, Valko, the husband of Anna, and he raped her even more, but he done horrendous things to her before he done that. And I thought, what is this girl going through? She's going through an awful lot, and I just can't take it anymore. Now, I did say to myself, can this movie get even worse for Katie? Surely it can, but lo and behold, it does. What they decide to do is keep her alive, but they decide to bury her in their basement. Again, that's even more nightmare fuel than you could ever imagine. Being raped and tortured all this time, and at the end of it, you don't even get the opportunity to be killed. They want to bury you alive. It's unbelievable. Fortunately for Katie, through an absolute miracle, the floor below the basement started to cave through, and the box that she was in fell down into the sewer, and she actually survived her ordeal. Now, at this point, I thought, okay, maybe we will get a revenge. And there was revenge in the film, but it was a little bit shorter than the revenge scenes that we got in the first movie. But it's fine, because some of the revenge moments were really good. But she was living in the sewers for quite a bit. She even got friendly with a priest, and she was just trying to build up her strength so that she can get her part of the revenge. Before her revenge scene though, it was quite cool that she actually finds the US Embassy. She could actually go home right now, but she looks at it, she stops, and she turns back. And when she gets friendly with this priest, she actually looks at the book, a Bible that he gave her, and she had it opened at a page, and the quote that we were looking at says, "Vengeance is mine," which is actually the name of the third movie in the franchise. But yes, it says "Vengeance is mine," and from that moment we're like, okay, let's go. Georgie is the first one that she captures, thankfully, because he was probably the worst, to be honest. And she ties him up and she cuts him to bits, and with his cuts she puts sewage inside the cuts that will obviously really infect him, and he will eventually die. That was horrible to look at, but again, it was so satisfying knowing that what he'd done to her, she's getting him back finally. She finds one of the other brothers, Nikolai. She goes to a club, she drugs him just like he drugs her, and she puts his head down the toilet with lots of feces, and he drowns that way. Now, as disgusting as that sounds, I feel like he didn't get his just desserts. I felt like he needed a little bit more torture before he died, so I think he maybe died the best way. Valko was up next. He was on this makeshift electric bed, and she was shocking him just like he done to her on the bed. Until eventually she put some sort of wiring down his throat and turned it on. It was a machine. It just completely obliterated his insides. And after that, she then turned on the electricity on the bed, and she just electrocuted him until he exploded. She kept going back and forward with Georgie, because Georgie didn't die straight away. Every time she went back to him, she was torturing him more and making sure his wounds were getting worse, and they certainly were. There's a scene when there's quite a few of them together. She takes Anna, she puts Anna in a box, and she takes her to Georgie so that she can show her that her own son is going to die. And at this point, Ivan's looking for them as well, but Ivan gets knocked out and he gets tied up in the sewers as well. So the three of them are all together near the end. Anna then has to watch Georgie die, thankfully, when she was sitting in the box and there was nothing that she could do. And then you've got Ivan, who's tied up to this makeshift bed in the sewers, and his balls are sitting, or they're clamped in a vice, and you actually see this happen. And she turns the vice until his balls eventually burst. The police officer from the beginning, he was actually talking to the priest for a little bit, and the priest told him that Katie was down in the sewers. So after he went down to the sewers, it was all too late because all the madness had already happened, and he eventually got there just in time before Ivan killed Katie, and he killed Ivan. And he looked around and he's thinking, this is absolute madness. Katie's obviously a psychopath, but then he said to himself, I could have prevented all of this, and he felt obviously guilty, so he decided to let Katie go. After everything she went through, she decided, do you know what, it's time now, I'm going to go to the US Embassy. She went to the embassy, her revenge was complete, and that was it, guys. I think that for a sequel to a film that maybe didn't even need a sequel, it was actually really decent. And one thing that stood out for me, just like the first movie, was Katie. The actress that played Katie, she gave us a powerhouse performance. And I said this before, not many actresses could do or would do what that actress done and went through in the making of I Spit on Your Grave 2. So props to her for even attempting that. The fact that she attempted it was good enough, but she actually carried the movie. She was amazing all the way through it. For those of you who have seen it, I don't know if maybe you felt the same, but the film felt like this 80s style Italian American horror movie like we saw back in the day, like Cannibal Ferox, Cannibal Holocaust, all those types of movies back in the 80s. That's the kind of film it looked and felt like, and especially when they went to Bulgaria. Obviously that was like an Eastern European country, so it felt like this kind of European movie rather than an American movie. And maybe it was, maybe there was a production in like a European production, but it certainly did feel like the old Italian American horror movies of the 80s. I think if I was looking at any issues, I think my biggest issue was Katie was able to recite all the words that were spoken to her as she was being raped, and maybe that's something that you would remember, but the fact that she's overdoing it with every revenge scene, I thought, oh, you can't really remember all that. Maybe concentrate on getting revenge first. That's a little tiny nitpick. For a film, again, that's just a sequel to another movie like this, then it was very decent, and there's quite a lot of plot holes, quite a lot of issues, but I think I can accept that it is what it is, and maybe the scenes where she's reciting all the lines is probably my biggest issue, but not a big issue at the end of the day. So what are your thoughts on this, guys? If you've seen it, leave your comments down below. Let me know what you thought of this. Does I Spit on Your Grave even need a sequel? Let me know down below and we can discuss it. And as always, thanks a lot for watching, thanks for subscribing, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.
I'll be right back.
What are you waiting for, huh?
Coming to get you, Barbara.
Ever played Skin the Cat?
Someone's in the